physical exam. Columbia, as other colleges, requires athletes to pass a physical in order to compete in intercollegiate athletics. I went for the physical and failed. The reason why I failed was I had an accident in my high school junior year. I got hit in the eye with a baseball and an impaired vision in one eye. And the doctor who examined me thought that this sport was too dangerous for me. So I tried to explain to him that fencing is a very safe sport. We have a mask. Blades cannot penetrate the mask. I also explained to him that this happened in my junior year of high school. In my senior year, I was captain of the team and undefeated. But all to no avail. He just felt it was too dangerous and he wasn't going to sign the dotted line. So I went into Joe Galati's office, fearful that my career in fencing at Columbia ended before it even started. Joe set up a meeting with the doctor. And he came into the meeting with a mask, a foil, an epee, and a saber. And at the meeting, he started to explain fencing to the doctor. Foil and epee are thrusting weapons. You hit with the point. But saber is a cutting weapon where you hit with the side of the blade. So even if there's a danger that equipment could fail, it's not so dangerous in saber because it's a cutting weapon. And then he started demonstrating with the mask how the epee is the front and the saber is the top of the head. The doctor listened very intently, and when Joe finished his explanation, Joe said, and of course, what I want to tell you is that because saber is a cutting weapon, but the other two are thrusting weapons, and I'm aware of this condition, I'm not going to let them fence foil and epee, I'm not going to let them fence saber. And so the doctor passed me in the physical and left the office. I sat there, quiet, but in stunned disbelief. I looked at Joe Galati and I said, John, what you said to the doctor is totally illogical, it makes no sense at all. I'm not fencing saber because it's safer than foil and epee. This is the weapon I fence. And the idea that saber is a cutting weapon, you could also make touches with a point too. Joe said, looked at me and said, "You're planning to be a lawyer?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, let me give you your first law lesson right now. What you said to the doctor was totally logical and made a lot of sense to you, but you failed the exam. What I said to the doctor was totally illogical and made no sense to you, but you passed the exam." If you're going to argue cases before judges, juries, and in this case a doctor, what makes sense to you is not important. You have to find the arguments that are going to make sense to the person who has to make a decision. And I thought that was a very interesting example. I had another example of Joe as a coach and mentor. The field of sports psychology never really developed until much later. But in 1952, Joe was a sports psychologist. We had our first match against the University of Pennsylvania. Before Dave Blackhammer was the coach. The University of Pennsylvania was a very strong saber team at the time. And the coach was Lajos Chazar, who everybody knows by just the name, the title, the Meister. So my usual practice on a Friday night was to go down to South Santelli. I took a saber lesson from Giorgio Santelli. And I practiced with all the other good and outstanding Olympians in the club, Tibor Nilas, George Worth, Al Portler. So following the usual routine on Friday night before the pen meet, I went down to the South Santelli to take my lesson in practice. I was met, before I could even change my clothes into a fencing uniform, by Joe Galati, who also was a coach at South San Antonio. And Joe looked at me and says, "You don't look too well tonight." I said, "I feel perfectly fine. I don't think you're offense tonight." No, that's what the coach says, you know. It's all right, I'll go home. I didn't tell you to go home. What do you want me to do? I want you to go in and I want you to sit down and I want you to watch the fencing. I said, "Why am I doing that? The University of Pennsylvania team is here practicing. And I want you to go and I want you to sit down and I want you to watch them. I want you to watch them, but I don't want them to watch you." So I went in, not understanding what I was doing, but I just sat there very carefully and watched the whole fencing. And the meet was the next day in the afternoon, and their top saber fencer was Bob Parmachek. And that was going to be the first bout of the meet, my bout against Bob Parmachek. Now, Bob was an outstanding saber fencer. He went on to win a state championship a year later. We fenced each other a number of times over a 2-year period. Sometimes I won 5-4, sometimes he won 5-4, but it was always a very close battle. That Saturday afternoon, I fenced my first bout and beat him 5-0. And following that victory, the Sabre team won 9-0, and Columbia went on to win the meet. That's what I said this before Dave started. At the end of the meet, the maestro was in stunned disbelief. He came up to congratulate Joe on the victory, and then he said to Joe, "I can't understand what I was watching." He says, "What kind of saber do you teach?" And Joe Velarde really didn't know how to answer that question, but Joe was never short of words. He smiled and said, "I teach winning saber." So, the only thing I didn't mention about his record, because now I'm looking at my notes, when Joe went to Columbia, Columbia had a record of 2 victories and 10 defeats. When Joe spent 3 years at Columbia, he ended up with a record of 27 victories and 11 defeats, raising the winning percentage from 167 to 711. And to this day, Joe Velarde is known as the progenitor of the modern age of fencing at Columbia. Now, I mentioned that Joe had an outstanding military service career. Joe, as it says in the booklet, in fact, if you look at the booklet, one of the comments, when I spoke to Joe on the phone before I came, he said, "Why did they put my picture in there with a flight jacket?" I said, "Well, you have a good military background." He says, "All right, but make sure everybody knows that I usually wear a jacket and tie, not a flight jacket." Joe was co-captain of the Brooklyn College team in 1941, December 7th, when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. Joe left college and enlisted in the Army Air Corps, and he flew 60 combat missions as a gunner in a B-52 bomber over Nazi Germany. When he came out, he then started his coaching career, and I guess I should say there's a sequel to this military service story. When I graduated law school, I had to go into the military service. It was the Korean crisis. I ended up going in the Judge Advocate General's Department as a first lieutenant and judge advocate. I was stationed at Manhattan Beach Air Force Station. I was trying a number of court martials as defense counsel. When I get a call one Monday morning while I'm drinking my cup of coffee, the base commander wants to see me. So I said, "All right, I finished my coffee," but my sergeant says, "The base commander wants to see you, you don't finish your coffee. You drop it, you go down and get another cup later." I had no idea what I did wrong. So I went down to the base commander's office, and there he was sitting with photographers, paper reporters, public relations people. He looks at me, and you have to realize that he was a full colonel, but when he was in college, he was an All-American football player. He looked at me and said, "You never told me you fenced." I said, "Well,